Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm very happy today to present to you Natasha Pierre. Did I say that right?
You did, yes.
Because there's no one
Correct.
in the world that could say my last name right. So Natasha is the executive director of Hillsborough NAMI. And I couldn't be happier to be having this conversation with you today because we need as much help as possible during this suicide prevention month and really just every day in general.
We do. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So before we get started, I want to just ask, what is your personal connection to wanting to be the executive director of NAMI?
Great question. So I've been involved with NAMI for several years in several cities and states across the country. And my personal connection is that I've lived with what's considered a severe mental illness for over 20 years. My full diagnosis is bipolar type 2, ultradian, post-traumatic stress, generalized anxiety, and EDNOS, which is an eating disorder not otherwise specified. So I've got a pretty colorful diagnosis.
You're qualified.
I'm qualified. I've got the lived experience,
Right.
yes, to talk about all of this.
Yes. So wonderful. So tell me do you mind just sharing a little bit about all of that? I mean, to me, that's like saying, I woke up and I had breakfast. Like that's my whole life is having these conversations. I do realize that there are other people that might be listening that don't really have an understanding of, number one, how somebody, from the outside looking in, you look very put together, very beautiful. You have a wonderful job and career. And I always like to break that stigma of what people might think mental health looks like. So you look like mental health. You look like mental wellness. So tell us a little bit more about your diagnosis.
So bipolar disorder is characterized by being at two poles, either the very depressed side or the very manic or hypomanic side. For me, bipolar 2, it was the depressed and the hypomanic. And depression is, I like to talk about it on a scale of 0 to 10. If 0 is suicidal, I have a plan, I'm ready to go. And 10 is extreme irritability, impatience, and not sleeping. For me, life has been bouncing in between those two. And for some people, they may bounce in between them, in a year or in a month. For me, my symptoms, I would be bouncing, mixed states, rapid cycling, several times an hour, which, as you can imagine, will be very, very exhausting. I feel like I was very textbook in terms of grandiose thoughts. And yes, I'm going to write a book tonight. Let's stay up all night and do it. To depressed, in the bed, pressing the snooze button for 7-8 hours before you finally make your way to the living room. And that would happen to me several times a day. It was exhausting, absolutely exhausting. Anxiety for me kicked in right after 9/11. I was in New York for the World Trade Center attacks. And shortly thereafter, I began fainting all over New York City. I went to every doctor. I was physically healthy. And then one doctor said, I think you need to see a psychiatrist. And that's when I was diagnosed with PTSD because I was supposed to be at the World Trade Center on that day and, canceled at the very last minute to go see my agent and, avoided the attack. It was survivor's guilt. It was not being able to make sense of anything that happened, why I was spared and so many people lost their lives. And I was having a really tough time dealing with it. And back then, PTSD was something only for veterans, not for people who, were regular and normal. So I had a tough time. EDNOS, eating disorder not otherwise specified, really means I wasn't not eating because I wanted to be thin. I was not eating because it was linked to my paranoia about being poisoned and fearing that someone was trying to poison me. And so I wouldn't eat at all. And if I did, I would purge, which led in 2006 to me tearing my esophagus.
Mm.
So qualified.
Very well.
Anxiety, it's been a journey.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for
Mhm.
having the courage. I'm sure it's not the first time for sharing this information with us, because I think it is so important that people that look like you, that sound like you, that hear other people in the business world or the medical industry, myself included, that you can actually have suffered through something terrible, such as what you have suffered through, and still be here and executive director to NAMI. You know, I mean, it's no small feat. And I think it's important to show people that there is hope, right? Because I would assume you got the right help. And this month being, you know, 9/11 is here with us. I know there was a lot going on around social media that everybody was excited to have September come along, like through this pandemic, that there's another month, maybe a month of hope. And September is just like that Green Day song, Wake Me Up When September Ends. Right.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's because I too was in New York when 9/11 happened, and lost a lot of people. But so, and it, anyway, I'm sure that's another show for me and you. How about that?
Yes.
That's another show. But I do think it's very important, because I think that there is such a tremendous amount of stigma wrapped around people that have mental health issues. I have a dear friend who died, who had bipolar, who did not make it. There's so many people that are suffering that don't realize how much hope and how much help is out there. And you are here to tell us how much hope and help is out there. So tell everybody about NAMI.
So NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization. So when you think of mental health education, support groups, advocacy, and public outreach, that's what we do. And everything that we do and every service and program that we offer is 100% free to the person living with a diagnosis, to all their friends, family members, anyone who's affected by mental illness. We want to help them build a healthier and better life.
So lucky you joining
Mhm.
this wonderful organization during a global pandemic. What has that been like for you?
It's been interesting. On one hand, from a personal experience, because I am a peer and one who lives with a diagnosis, I've got tremendous gratitude because I can see how far I've come and how being consistent with my recovery plan has allowed me the opportunity to be here chatting with you. On the other hand, it reminds me of how much work there's still left to do, because our community still doesn't understand how a person who seemingly has everything, they're not unemployed, their families all together, why are they having a tough time with a pandemic? And it's relative. Of course, we know that COVID-19 didn't create mental illness, but it has given rise to a lot of mental health challenges across every demographic. And it's bittersweet, because on one hand, I'm grateful that we're having the conversations, those courageous conversations about mental health. But because we are, it means that there's a lot of people still suffering in silence.
Oh, for sure. You know, I've heard so much about NAMI, and I've heard so many great things. And I understand that you have, like, for family members of people that are suffering, you have certain kinds of groups, right? Don't you also have like youth groups? Can you break some of that down so people are aware? Because I know for me, like, I've done talks before, and I might bring up Alcoholics Anonymous or some other 12-step recovery group or some other resource. And participants in the audience, which is still kind of shocking to me, will be like, oh, there's Al-Anon, there's a place for families that have suffered. I'm like, oh yes, for like 80 plus years now. So I don't want to take that for granted. I really want to break down what is available through the wonderful organization of NAMI.
So, you know, within the greater mental health community, there are smaller communities, and everyone has a different lived experience. So, the person living with a diagnosis, they've got their own course and support group, and that's separate from the parent, the spouse, the sibling, the friend, or just the ally who wants to learn more about how they can better support without losing themselves. We also have Sharing Hope, which is just for the African American experience. We have FaithNet for people in faith communities and really who want to understand, okay, where is the diagnosis and God and how does that all work for me? We've had requests for, of course, LGBTQ, law enforcement, because everyone experiences mental illness differently and mental health challenges differently based on their profession, like law enforcement, based on their culture, like in many Asian, Hispanic, and Black communities. And so we want to ensure that everyone is being supported and receiving the education that they need. So we've created several different programs for that.
Well, I think that's so needed. You know, throughout all of this racial unjust, let alone a global pandemic, I've had a lot of my friends ask me, because I'm a resource of, you know, what doctor to go to, what therapist to go to. And I was asked, you know, do you have any African American therapists to recommend? And I didn't. So then I had to go and research that myself. So it is great to know that it's like categorized, because everybody needs to relate and identify. It's the same thing I feel with 12-step recovery. The reason that I was able to move through that community so well is because I identified with everybody that was there.
Absolutely. Representation matters even in mental health. So we have Homefront, which is a program for families of veterans in active duty military. And we've been asked, even in this year, in March, I was asked, can we do a group for people who are 9/11 survivors? Because I found out that the greatest population of people outside of New York and New Jersey that were directly impacted by 9/11 are in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and when you talk about, like, I'm not a mom, I'm not going to talk to a mother about, well, you know, were the contractions really that bad? Couldn't you tough it out? I don't have that experience, that lived experience. Same thing for a veteran. If you're a combat veteran, you want to speak to someone who understands. And so for a person living with a diagnosis, you know, their experience is very different from their parent or spouse. And we recognize that, and we want to make sure that everyone has their safe space to share and to feel supported.
Well, I love it because, you know, I love that it's a peer-led support group. So let me understand something, because I believe that whoever is leading any kind of support group really needs to be a leader of sorts. And although it peer-led, I would assume that there's some type of guidelines for whoever is leading the peer-led support group. Can you talk about that a little?
Absolutely. We want to make sure that everyone's been in recovery for at least two years. And
Mm-hmm.
that means you've been working your RAP plan, your recovery plan, it's working for you. And you've got some tools under your belt that you're going to be able to share with others. So right now, I'm one of the facilitators for a connection recovery support group. And that's a support group for anyone living with a diagnosis. Well, it's been several years since I've had a major, I'd say, dust up. That's what I like to call it because it sounds better, a major dust up. And so in my, you know, what I call my wellness toolkit, I've got lots and lots of resources, things that I've tried, what worked, what doesn't work, what works during a panic attack when you're in public versus what works during a panic attack when you're at home by yourself. And these are the things, because I've been through it, I'm able to share with others. And in our support groups, we all share. We share apps and resources and links to whatever can help us. Sometimes, you know, sometimes it's not always about getting rid of every symptom. Sometimes it's learning how to manage it better. And as I talk to you here, it's not that I'm symptom free. It's that I've got so many things in my toolkit that I can better manage my symptoms. And I'm very aware of when there might be fluctuations in my mood. I share very often, get a full moon tracker, Get an app that
Love
tells you when
that.
there's going to be, yes,
Yes.
yes, get an app that lets you know. You need to know because 3 days before the full moon and 3 days after, you're going to feel a little bit different. For my ladies, I said, get an app that tracks your menstrual cycle because you're going to think your medicine isn't working, you're losing your mind, you're getting worse, and it's just hormones. You'll be fine in a couple days. So it's the awareness, the
Yeah.
self-awareness, I believe, is what has enabled me to really get a grip on my mental health and maintain my mental wellness.
Yeah, I always like to offer practical tools,
Mhm.
because I too I have a toolbox the size of my house, because I need to pull at it so much. And it's been so different through the years. A lot of it is to do with exercising and biking and being in nature and eating the right foods and meditating. But then I also like to recommend podcasts to people. Here's a podcast prescription for you
Yes.
to find
Yes.
the people that can identify with what you're going through, because we all want to hear that identification. We all want to be around people that understand what it's like. So
Absolutely.
I understand that there's a need for volunteers. So can you tell me about what somebody would have to do to become a volunteer?
Have a passion for mental health.
Woohoo!
Complete our application, know where your strengths, skills, talents, and abilities are, and bring your passion to that place. If you're passionate about, facilitating and training, we've got several courses that you can do. If you love social media, we want you and need you. If you just like admin, great. There's always some admin to do. Again, we are 100% funded by our donors, sponsors, and members. So we need volunteers. Volunteers enable us to do everything that we've been doing and want to continue doing for the county.
So because of the pandemic, of course, I'm hoping before I ask this, I'm sure there is some Zoom technology happening to have meetings for people that still don't feel okay with showing up. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. One of our first responses was to partner with NAMI County, and Debbie Prue, who's the executive director over there. We began the Connection Recovery Support Group 3 times a week back in April, and we've seen attendance increase over time. Varied participants, every age, every demographic, every level of stress. And it's been, again, it's wonderful that we can provide this resource, but we've seen over time that the longer the pandemic continues, the more people are having a really tough time.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Is there a Pinellas NAMI that you could tell
Yes,
everybody?
there is.
Good.
Yes, we've got in Tampa Bay, we've got NAMI Pinellas, Hillsborough, Pasco, Polk, Hernando, Sarasota, and there's several others throughout the state of Florida. And one of the great things is, here in Hillsborough and Pasco, we offer our support groups on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you wanted to do one on Tuesday and Thursday or two on a Monday, you're welcome to attend any other support group in the state and in the country. That's how serious we are about ensuring that people understand you're not alone. No matter what you feel, what you're experiencing, there's someone else who's experienced it. And we want to offer the support and the resources and the strategies and the apps and the laughter, because
Yeah.
we end every support group with a corny joke. We do, because, we want to leave on a high note.
Well, I think it is so important. I mean,
Mhm.
one of the books that I love, and it's also a podcast, is The Hilarious World of Depression. And who would have thought that, somebody would even call it that? And it's all comedians that are talking about their struggles through addiction, anxiety, depression. And, they're laughing about it because obviously they have it under wraps right now.
Mhm.
They're using their mental health toolkit. But I think it's so important that we all laugh. And we identify more with other people, and we can find the comedy in some of our idiosyncrasies of and we have many. I'll speak for myself.
Many.
Many.
I
So,
I think the full moon app was the best for me. When I
yes, I love it.
started tracking it, I realized, oh, Natasha, you're gonna be fine in 3 days. Just relax. It's gonna be okay. Like, oh, why was I so upset?
Well, and I definitely think, I love that you brought up the resource about for women tracking our menstrual cycle. I mean, that saved not only my life, but my husband's. You know, I mean, don't worry. Any day I'm going to be fine. But if I ask for that chocolate bar, you better go get it.
That's in the chocolate is in the toolkit too. It can be. Yeah.
So one of the things that I love the most, I have to say, is that it is peer-led. I have been a huge advocate for having more allies within all behavioral and mental health in hospitals with doctors. I've been trying to stress as much as possible the importance of having real experience, people that really have an understanding of what it's like, because I just think by nature, another human being will feel more comfortable opening up when they can say, hey, you know what, listen, I'm not going to talk to Natasha. She has no idea what it's like. And then you're like, let's have a conversation about that. Yeah, I think that it's
True.
so important. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely important. And because of what mental health is and how it's already viewed in the community, you've got to have peers. This isn't something where, someone breaks a leg and, we can imagine, wow, yeah, that probably hurt, because we can see it. What you're talking about is something that no one can see. No one can see the anxiety, the heart palpitations. No one can see how quickly your mood shifts unless it's just by your demeanor. And there are people, when the stat is 1 in 5 people living with a mental illness, we're everywhere. We are your accountant, your attorney, your mechanic, your hairdresser, and we're managing symptoms and we're going through life with our silent scream because we're not sure if someone else will treat us the same or receive us because they have this new information. So one of the things, NAMI and myself, we want to do is we want to shatter every stereotype. And that's why I share my story as much as I do, because whatever stereotype you had, if it was the person drooling in the corner, the person talking to themselves, yeah, that could happen. But if we're seeing the public manifestation of mental illness, it means we haven't done our job as a community. It means we haven't created a system of care that insulates a person at their worst, at their lowest. It really is a failure on our part as a community. No one should ever be homeless because they're mentally ill. In the same way we rally around people when they have cancer, we send the edible arrangements, we're sending the text, you're a warrior, you're gonna make it through. What happens when a person gets a Baker Act or a Marchman Act? Radio silence.
Yeah.
We need to educate ourselves to respond with compassion, even when we don't understand. Mental illness isn't a character flaw. It's not something that we can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and keep it going. And we need to recognize that what is traumatic for one person, what is a mental illness for one person may not be for everyone. Trauma is something that I speak a lot about because, I wouldn't say that trauma is necessarily a mental illness. I think it's a human response to trauma. Whether it's a car crash, plane crash, you're chased by a dog, you're mugged, you're having a human response to something that has really shaken your world. And in a pandemic, when you're not sure what the rules of engagement are, is the cloth mask, the N95, is it a cloth mask with the surgical mask, 6 feet, no shaking hands? The rules are changing almost every day. It is, for lack of a better phrase, crazy making. So this isn't just mental illness right now. This is a mental health challenge where we're all under duress. And that's what's happening right now.
We are all under duress. That is for sure. I love talking about trauma. I think drama, because, and I'll share with you briefly that it wasn't until I released my book that I understood, and this is 25 years after I suffered from massive depression and attempted suicide, that I went through so much trauma. I didn't relate it to that. I just thought I wasn't like everybody else. I'm depressed now. Meanwhile, I had gone through all of these years of, abusing myself and being abused. And now I have no drugs and no alcohol, and I'm just supposed to be okay. Right. So the trauma impact is massive. And so many people have little traumas, I call it little traumas everywhere. Right. And now we're having this huge global trauma together. So we all need to just start getting real okay with having conversations with each other, but especially a support group like NAMI, who's really just based to be there to help all of us.
Absolutely. And you brought up a good point. What do you do when memories return, but you don't have alcohol or drugs or golf or the beach or Panera or Starbucks or the mall or any of the other activities that you did to make you temporarily forget? So what we're seeing right now is there's a resurgence of memories. People are remembering past rapes that they haven't reported. They're remembering combat. They're remembering neglect and adverse childhood experiences. Those memories are coming to the surface. And, you mentioned earlier about getting, an African-American therapist or psychiatrist across the state of Florida. There is a shortage of mental health professionals. And then when you drill down into, veterans, African-American, Latino, it gets even more scarce. Now let's drill down into the ones that take your insurance. Now we've got a problem. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, this is a free resource, everybody, right? I mean, is there some good news today? This is a free resource. There is absolutely no shame in calling and getting some help and going to one of these meetings, especially, you can go through Zoom. I mean, and you can go in Pasco, you could go in Pinellas, you could jump on Tampa. You could travel all over Tampa Bay if you want to and find out where all of your people are, because I know I'm going to do that myself. I think that it's so important, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of this today and also being so brave and courageous and allowing all of us to know that we're not alone.
You're not alone. And I'm going to do it until it's no longer brave. And it's just like, oh yeah, she has bipolar disorder. She's schizoaffective. Just as common as we'd say, I'm going to get a root canal. I'm going to go see my therapist. We need it to be that common because there are people dying. And this is a life or death issue for many people. And that's why I share.
Well, Natasha, I think at this stage in 2020, if you're not going to a therapist, there's probably something wrong with you.
I agree. I agree completely. Yes.
Prevention is actually a good idea. You don't even have to be in such distress without reaching out and getting help. And every time today, I said this recently to a friend of mine, I was giving, just a few dollars to a homeless person that I saw. And he said, why do you always have to stop everything? Well, because every time I see a homeless person, I see myself.
That could have been me.
Right? When you have overcome and when you are blessed with the life that we get to live today, I see you, I see you, I see you, I see you in me. So we're not alone. Thank you so much, Natasha. I hope we get to have another conversation.
Thank you. Absolutely. Anytime. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
So don't forget, if you mention that you have seen the show or listened to the podcast, Thai Technology, 3 months for free.